Okay, so here's where we are so far. We've made 2 commits. We've made 2 different snapshots on just your home computer. This picture is supposed to represent that. Each of these circles is a snapshot of your code base. Commits also have unique identifying names associated with them, called hashes. It's not really important right now what those are, and you can read about it on your own if you want. But for the moment, I'm just using these as the names. So yes, they look weird, and you can read about it, like I said, if you want. So we've got these 3 commits. All right, what I want to do is now show you how you can create a remote Git repository and link it to your local Git repository. The idea here is the remote one is hosted on a server, so that way you can take your snapshots and you can push them to the remote one, and then somebody else could pull them down to their own computer. So this is how you kind of collaborate over the cloud. Alright, so notice that Git is completely separate from GitHub. A lot of people think that they're the same thing. They're not the same thing. GitHub is a Git server that can host Git repositories, but there's lots of other Git servers besides GitHub. You can even run your own if you want. And you don't even need to do this if you don't want to. If you just want to use Git on your local computer just as a way to keep track of your software versions for yourself, you could do that. Alright, all that said, let's actually use GitHub for the moment. So our first step is going to be to make a repo on GitHub and then to add it as our remote repository for the particular repository that we've been editing on our own computers. Alright, so if you haven't made a GitHub account, go ahead and do that. It'll take a little while. And then when you have made a GitHub account, here's how you make a new repository on GitHub. It's this button that says Create New Repository. I'm going to call mine Number Bag. We could give it a description, but this is just a temporary example, so I'm not going to give it a description. You can't make yours private unless you pay money to GitHub, which you could do if you wanted. If we were making a more serious project, we would initialize it with a README file so that other people could see what in the world is our project about. Alright, so we'll create a repository. And here's what it looks like. So if you click this clone or download button, it will give you a URL here. So copy the URL because we're going to need this in order to link our local repository with this remote repository. The command you use to add a remote repository is as follows. Well, first, print your working directory. Make sure that you are inside your actual Git repository. So here I am inside Number Bag. All right, so git remote add, so that makes sense. We're adding a remote repository to this one. And by adding it, I mean we are linking our local repository with the remote one. It's not like we're like copying it to our local computers or anything. Okay, so git remote add. Origin is going to be the name for the remote repository. And then you got to paste, so I right-clicked and I went to paste. Oops. So you got to paste the URL for the remote repository. It looks like it was not in my buffer. So let's go back here and I'll clone and download. Copied. Okay, so let's try this again. You might not know this, but if you hit the up arrow key, it will let you go through your old commands here. All right, so I'm going to paste it. There we go. Git remote add origin URL. And when I hit enter, hopefully it has worked. Okay, so here's the situation. We now have a remote. We've connected our local repository to the remote repository. But we still have all of these commits, all of these snapshots that we took from last time, and we want a way to push them all to the remote so that way somebody else could pull them down to their computer. This picture is actually a little bit inaccurate. There's some other changes that I don't want to talk about right now, but I just felt like I had to tell you that. So let me show you how you can push your changes to the remote server. So git push origin master. Git push means that you're going to push changes to the remote. Origin is the name of the remote. Master you don't know about, but you're allowed to keep track of multiple parallel versions of your code, and those different versions have names. We only have one right now, which is called master. So we're saying we're going to push all our changes to the master version. And it's going to have you type your credentials. And if all has gone well, you should see something like this. It's going to count up the objects, and it's going to compress them all, and it's going to rate them, and it's going to send them all. And so if you don't see anything that indicates an error has occurred, then it has worked. And let's go back to our remote, and if I refresh the page, now you see an src folder, and you see our files there. So we've been successful.